my name is Birgit Hermann. Grew up in Germany. I spent a lot of my life in the Asia Pacific, specifically in New Zealand, and the last 10 years in Timor-Leste. That's a small island nation, kind of nestled between Australia and Indonesia. I consider myself a change maker. I've been in quite a few management positions on the ground in places like Timor-Leste, but also in other areas where it's about coastal communities and climate change adaptation and marine conservation and the wider development sector, and just really supporting livelihoods and supporting communities to make changes for the better. I've done quite a few endurance challenges. So I'm a trail runner, I'm a mountain biker, and I'm a freediver. And I'm really looking forward to digging in a little bit and talking about that more.
So what were you like as a little girl? Like, have you always been like interested in adventure and sports? Did you come from sort of a sporty background?
I did, yes. Definitely. I think for me, growing up in Germany, I think the definition of what is sporty is just a different one than later on in my 20s when I moved to New Zealand. I realized what it really means to be an outdoor lover. I spent my childhood quite a few years with the Scouts, and that meant like a lot of going on hikes and camping trips and being out and about and getting dirty and sweating a lot by carrying really heavy items around. And I did a lot of swimming. I was a competitive swimmer for many years, and then tried a little bit of everything else, from judo to volleyball and cycling everywhere, just more as a means of transport, which is very common in Germany. Yeah, but generally, definitely, like not an extreme athlete, but I definitely was always on the sporty side.
Why did you move to New Zealand, and what changed for you sort of being out there to turn you into that outdoor lover?
I was just always fascinated by other cultures and other countries. I had the privilege of having a dad who was a French teacher who brought us out in every school holidays to go and explore more like the European neighborhoods, like the countries that were a bit closer by. But I was always very interested in going and seeing the world. And the moment I finished from high school, I went a year to the States. And then I had an opportunity during my studies. I spent a year in Spain, and my first internship, I went to the Caribbean, to Tobago. And then I just really wanted to go somewhere for a little bit longer. And that was where my master's studies, my second degree, was the perfect opportunity. And it was a little bit random in a sense. I wanted to go in an English-speaking country because I thought that brings me the most opportunities later on in life, just to improve the English language. But then I was really drawn to the idea of going to a place like New Zealand or Australia or maybe South Africa, where there were outdoor opportunities. And at that stage, I was quite into surfing. In New Zealand is maybe not like the number one surf destination, but just from the study program that I could find there and the affordability of making it all happen and the option of actually being able to surf, that was in the end the deciding factor that made me go over there. Absolutely the right decision. Like I felt immediately at home when I arrived in Auckland.
One of the first big challenges that you did was in Africa. Do you want to share more about that challenge, that adventure, how it came about and why you decided to do it?
Of course, there's always a little bit of a lead up, yeah, in a sense. Like for me, I'm feeling now I'm quite a few years older. So when I look back now in hindsight, it feels like, about 11 years ago, that's when really my major breakthrough came through by making a decision of signing up for the Tour d'Afrique, which is crossing the entire African continent all the way from Cairo down to Cape Town in South Africa. So a 12,000 kilometer journey, 4 months, every day cycling. Like there was every fifth day was a rest day, but it was a very sporty program. It was a stage race. I mean, of course, this is not something you just overnight think, oh, that's what I do. I mean, there was a lot of building blocks on the way. And at that stage, I had already lived in New Zealand for 7, maybe 8 years. And as I just hinted before, for me, just really being in New Zealand and being exposed to so many people who are just spending their entire free time out in the outdoors and pushing themselves and signing up for trail running events and long distance running events and mountain biking for longer distances. And so this was really all a bit the testing ground. And at that time, it was close to my 33rd birthday, and I felt like, oh no, this this needs to be something bigger. I can't just continue in the same pattern. And I loved it so much in New Zealand, but I was always saying it's almost a bit too early that I moved to this place, because I'm feeling too young to be settled and spending the the many next years in this one place. So I wanted to always see more, and had this inner desire of just seeing what else is out there and how can I experiment also what I'm capable of. And so there was a phase, and that type of phase repeated a few times later on, where I just was a little bit, I had this inner anxiety, or anxiety is maybe the wrong word, but I like this inner unsettledness of, oh, there's something more to life. And what is it? And that's when I was on the lookout, and I just randomly, interestingly, and in a book from the library, I've heard that there were I read that there were a group of people a few years prior had started this Tour d'Afrique, and that it's now a regular thing. And once a year, there's a group going together and cycling the length of the African continent as a race or as an expedition. And this was really what I needed in that moment. It kept me awake, and I was for hours researching anything I could do, anything I could find. And it literally, like in that one night, sleep deprived, I made this decision that I need to find a way to make that happen. And that was really, how it all started. And then I slowly got my courage together to actually really sign up and train for it and buy all of this equipment I needed for a 4-month bicycle journey, and educate myself about so many little aspects that I didn't even know were important for cycling. Because, if you're like just a mountain bike weekend warrior, you don't need to know so much detail and about mechanics and fixing bikes and things like that. And that's really for me this 4 months journey of eventually actually popping out in South Africa at the finish line, and having done something that probably 6 months before was still in this area of being completely impossible, cycling 12,000 kilometers and being on a bicycle with kind of sore butt and sore fingers and sore everything for 4 months, that this is actually something I would be able to do.
Because that experience did actually change your perspective on what is possible, because you certainly dealt with a couple of challenges during that cycle ride, 12,000 kilometers across the continent. Do you want to share what sort of happened and how that changed your perspective on what is possible?
There's so many things that changed. I think also the one part was the physical achievement, and actually trusting myself that if I put my head and my mind towards something, and I train and I get advice how to be smart about my energy levels and my nutrition and stretching and those kind of things, like just kind of realizing like all those small steps really accumulate and they get you somewhere. So this was the one thing of really being at that finish line and realizing, wow, it really felt like I was on this high after this journey of pushing through really hot weather, really cold weather, being just exposed to so much sun, being exposed to so much dust. Of course, having like sometimes with all of the different food and the bacteria and all of this, like there was many days where my body was quite, not in the ideal situation, but I was just pushing through, and I made it to the end. So this was the one aspect of this, developing this inner trust that if I set my head and my mind towards something, it's that the moment this mindset shift happens, there is always someone who supports you. There's always someone who's really seeing your attitude and your energy and wants to help you, because you're putting all of this focus in there. So this was the one part. But then the other part was actually also, because when I was on the lookout for a big challenge, I mean, yes, there was the one part was this testing my physical limits. But on the other hand, I also had the feeling there is more to what I'm believing I can do from my career and my work life and the whole because the journey was so long and I wanted to spend more months on the African continent. So I resigned from my permanent role. I had packed up my entire life in New Zealand in boxes and put it in storage and sold a lot. So there was so much more to it. It was not just pushing for a few months and then with the idea of getting back into my old life. I actually set it up in the way that I free myself up to be open to something new afterwards. And doing and really being out there for 4 months, it was the perfect opening and the perfect foundation for then really being ready to look over my own horizon and see what else is actually possible. And then I spent the entire year on the African continent and was looking for a few work opportunities. I was looking for a few projects to get my teeth in, and really testing myself in a complete different environment, how I'm getting perceived, and then how do I position myself in interviews, and there was just so much spin-off from this achievement I had in this physical achievement of making something close to impossible happen. This whole cycling the whole African continent, that gave me so much energy for thinking big and dreaming big and mobilizing myself and others to open other doors as well. So I think that was really the two huge learnings for me, that this physical experience can actually translate into the wider outlook and mindset.
Yeah. I really love what you shared there, especially around like that mindset shift and building that sort of inner trust. And you've had this year, sort of 4 months on the cycle challenge, but this year sort of in Africa, almost being open to these new opportunities and these new doors opening. How did you know what was the right decision for the next step for you to take in terms of when you're presented with all these different opportunities? How did you know which door was the right one to walk through? Like, how did you make your decision about what you were going to do next?
It was really not easy, I actually have to say. So like when I was still on the African continent, experimenting around and doing everything a bit more playful still, there I felt so energized and I felt really encouraged. But then the end of the 12 months came, and then there was a little bit of decision point. There were just a few practicalities from getting work rights and visa in any of the African countries. So I made at the time a decision, okay, I'll just for an interim time, I'll go back to New Zealand, take a bit stock, kind of see if I can also just to top up my monetary situation after spending a lot of money for 1 year. Going back to New Zealand, I remember I found it really difficult to feel kind of at home again, because suddenly I felt such a sense of belonging, and there were so many communities that I felt part of before that year. And then I had a year of being exposed to people who were also pushing themselves and doing something very extraordinary on a daily basis. And then coming back to something that used to be so familiar and where I felt really at home, I actually found it really difficult I was a little bit on the lookout for a role model to orientate myself. How could I now combine this huge growth experience that I experienced and this quite significant mindset shift, and how can I actually bring this into a bit in a normal day-to-day life again, in something that felt actually quite comfortable beforehand. And so I remember I was a little bit pick and choosing. So I found a lot of individuals who always were having a small part of what they were doing was something I really admired. And I was trying to kind of be a little inspired and connecting with them on that level. But I just couldn't find anyone who had the full hustle, in a sense. Yeah, they were always like pieces were quite, I was like, yeah, that's inspiring. That's something I'm admiring. That's something where I would like to embed and integrate in my own way forward. But then I really was like, and later on I realized this is the whole problem when you're a pioneer in some regards. There is just no role model that fits all the bills. Like you can always find a role model for something, but it's very difficult to find a role model for the whole, because if you try to be a little extraordinary, or what you do is extraordinary, then it's by definition very difficult to find someone who has done this before that you can take as an example. And so that was a bit of a shift for me to accept the fact that I kind of need to pick and choose and just like take the best of some communities and some individuals and connect for certain things with this group or this person, and for certain other things with another group, and kind of build that way my new grown-up version of myself.
You have continued to take on big challenges, even when you moved to now. Am I saying, is it Timor-Leste?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I got it right. Fantastic.
Yes.
That's very that. What's it like living there and training there for big challenges when you're in such a remote location and almost just so far away from everyone and everything? Like, how did you make that work for you and, fitting in work and your lifestyle and training?
So when I first arrived 10 years ago, the country was even more remote than what it is now. And also from getting there, from having access to things that need to be imported. And so anything from new shoes, new, I don't know, a running pack, nutrition, like all of those things that are so easily accessible when you're in a country where you can just order it online and a few days later it arrives in your postal system. So this made it, I think in the first year, it actually was almost helpful. And my first year when I went to Timor-Leste, I was based on a small island off the main island. And I was volunteering there. And I started for the first time a Facebook page, a public facing Facebook page. And at the time, I called it 2016 Kilometers Through Timor-Leste, because I wanted to use the year 2016 in a way to move either running or cycling 2016 kilometers and raise money for the project I was volunteering for. And that actually helped me quite a bit, because I was experimenting with this whole thing about actually talking about what I do and what I see and the new experiences I had. And it helped me a bit processing myself. But it also motivated me by having some accountability that way, of knowing there is actually some people reading and checking and sometimes putting a donation down in order for me to achieve my target of raising a couple of $1,000. So this kind of, that was a bit of it had two sides. Yeah. On the one hand, even it was very difficult getting quality items and nutrition in, but on the other hand, it was actually helping me generating community. And they were also at the time in Timor-Leste, because there's not that many things to do. It was actually relatively easy to connect with other people who were interested in trail running and hiking and mountain biking and spending time in the ocean, in finding groups to connect with and going out for longer adventures. Yeah, so it was actually kind of a bit of both. But then in future years, my role became much more senior, and I was always in an executive leadership role. And so there was also the time aspect, another thing of bringing the logistics. So on the one hand, like training for something and then having very significant workloads and working sometimes very unsustainable working hours. Just to give an example, I signed up for an Antarctica marathon, which could, of course, not be more different than being in a tropical country where it's hot and humid and you have to go running before the sun gets out to avoid the burst of the heat, and then training for minus temperatures. I had to really improvise a lot. Like the sand was very similar to running in snow, so that type of was quite helpful. But I really had to plan like my travel journey ahead of the time, and making sure that I find a way to accommodate my work commitments, that I could do them remotely, and that I could find a way to be in a cold country before then actually going down to Antarctica. It really tested me on so many levels, because I had this, after this very positive experience of starting this Facebook page, I really wanted to talk about my experiences of exploring other parts of nature and other parts of the world through endurance challenges. So for me, it was very important to take photos and maybe little videos and putting things online and talking about my training, as well as getting ready with the logistics. That was quite an important aspect for me to share, so that it's not just something I do for myself, but that I can actually use it to hopefully inspire others to think about like bigger things and plans that may sound a little bit impossible, like training for an event that's very cold in a place that's has complete opposite conditions.
Tell us about your experience in Antarctica then. What was that like?
The irony was that I was trying to raise really more awareness about the issues and the consequences of climate change, and was raising some funds for an organization that was doing a lot of research in Antarctica that to translate what that means for our wider planet. And the reality was I was training and preparing with all of the different layers and the food, all of those things, to be prepared for blizzards and be prepared for really cold temperatures. And because it's a very fragile environment, there's very strict rules, like the path is between existing research stations so that you are not impacting the environment unnecessarily. And you're not allowed to bring any like wrapped food item, for example, on there, so that there's very, very little pollution by landing on land. Unfortunately, what actually happened was that in that year, there was a very warm phase coming through. So there was barely any ice or snow on the track that we were running. So it was very slush. It was very muddy. There were quite a lot of penguins at the start line. And we had to do a few laps because, some of the research stations didn't want us to come close because it was still in the aftermath of COVID-19. So they didn't want any people to come too close. So we had a relatively small track and we had to do laps. So instead of going for 142-kilometer lap, we actually had to do a few repeats. And so that the trail got muddier and muddier. And because it was very unprecedented, like the temperatures are really not, they were supposed to be much colder, but it was not in that particular week. So it got muddier and muddier, and those penguins at the start line, they poo a lot. And it was very difficult to distinguish after a while whether you're actually running in poo or whether you're running in mud. And unfortunately, my second lap, I slipped because the mud was already deeper than knee deep. And I'm pretty sure I was actually covered in penguin poo, unfortunately. But yeah, so those were like the experiences that I did really not foresee, because all the training was about cold temperatures and blizzards and being prepared for the captain calling it off and bringing us back to the boat because the conditions may be unsuitable and dangerous for us to stay out. But on that actual race day, we had a very sad story of climate change being very obvious, and the temperatures were very warm, and the penguin poo situation was a bit of a funny add-on.
Going back to your home into Timor-Leste, one of the things, I think did you start learning to free dive there, or had you always been a free diver? What was your story with free diving?
Exactly. I started it in Timor because my first year I was on the small island Atauro, which is a beautiful island, has those turquoise waters. There's about 10,000-12,000 people living on the entire island, but this village where I lived, it was more like 1,000 or 1,200 people, so a very small community. So for me to keep my sanity, every morning I went either running or I had my mountain bike there. I went for mountain bike trails. It's quite steep, everything. It's a small island, but it has a 1,000-meter mountain. And I also went snorkeling. I brought my scuba dive equipment over, but it's also the problem with scuba diving is you need always a buddy. So that wasn't something I could do very often. Then I heard that there's a freediving school opening in Dili, in the capital. And completely naively, I signed up for it. And in that weekend course, I was then actually a little bit kind of surprised to find out that also with freediving, you should never freedive alone. So this was then in the end the start for me trying to mobilize anyone I met in Dili on evening events to try to sign up for a freediving course themselves, so that there's some buddies, because it was a brand new thing in Timor-Leste. Traditionally there's a lot of the fishing communities, they all freedive, they all spear fishing. But as a sport, that was something no one had done before. And I got completely hooked. I signed up more from a practicality point of view and thinking, oh yeah, it's a nice thing to do. And I can maybe spend a little bit more time snorkeling and hold my breath a little bit better to take photos, and that they're not shaky so much. That was really the initial idea. And then I did this course and I found it super easy, the first course. And then my instructor told me, oh, if you progress the next course, you learn how to do free fall. And this was for me such an intriguing concept that I would be in the ocean feeling like I'm in space and I'm just without moving, I'm falling in a sense. Yeah, I'm sinking. I think this curiosity of just seeing what happens to yourself and experiencing how it is being in the water, it just opened so many new doors for me. It's a very meditative activity, freediving, because you need to calm down, you need to get your heart rate down, you want to be as oxygen conserving as you can so that your breath hold is as long as possible. And so I learned so much about the calming part and the rejuvenating and regenerating part. Because I think before I had done a bit of yoga, but even with yoga, I think sometimes there's so much instructors always tell you breathe in and breathe out at certain movements, but there's not the feedback is not as clear as in freediving. If you're not relaxing in a true sense, meaning not just your physical movements, but also your head, your breath hold is impacted. So it's like a mirror. Like if you pop up really quickly because you're out of breath, it actually means you're not really relaxed in a true sense. It really opened so much for me there, finding that active meditation in a sense, and exploring the ocean. And then in parallel, I started also working marine conservation and being for years always working with the coastal communities, and it made me just much more connected to the ocean. Like something like scuba diving, I find there's always a lot of noise, there's a lot of bubbles, and you have a lot of technical equipment. Versus with freediving, you also have equipment, but you could actually freedive with very, very little equipment. You could go without fins if you want. So I feel much more part of the wider ocean and being like tiny, tiny little spectrum in this big, wide open vastness, especially places like Timor. The visibility is stunning and you can see very far away. If you're lucky, you can see a dugong, which is a big mammal underwater. Or, I mean, there's all of this colorful fish life. And yeah, it really opened a big journey. By the same, where you asked before about, I mean, in Timor, there's limitations. There was a school for a while and then school closed. For me to progress with my own journey. Now I'm an instructor and I did a competition a few years ago. So I'm really entered this professional freediving life a few years ago. And that meant always I had to travel to other places. So I went to Indonesia quite a few times to advance my journey. And then I spent almost a year in total now in Egypt, in Dahab, and learned a lot there and connected with community and really brought all the learnings from freediving back to Timor and teaching here a lot of Timorese, which is really, really nice. I guess that's a passion project of mine.
Some of the words that you, especially when talking about sort of freediving, about, calming the mind and meditation. And I think, like the mental side, obviously we've talked about, the physical side of challenges and the mental sides of challenges that you've done as well, and how the lessons that you can learn from challenges, from, stepping outside your comfort zone, can be applied to everyday life and into work. And that's one of the things that you're doing actually at the moment, because you've just written a new book. Would you like to share more about your new book and how everything sort of how those different factors combine together?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And actually, you summarized this very nicely. For me, the last 3 years was a journey of putting it really all together. Because before I separated my endurance challenges, my sport endeavors, and my pushing outside the comfort zone in the workplace, I just separated that a bit. And for many years, I thought that was even smart. But actually, it was wearing me out. And I felt always a bit fake in a Monday to Friday daylight setting, in a sense. Like I was very successful and I achieved a lot. But what actually was a lot of my driving force was the learnings the lessons learned that I had in the endurance challenges. Because there is, especially as a woman, I find the sports I chose, they were mostly male dominated. And because I put so much effort in, I really progressed, and I was always successful in my own way in the mountain biking and the running. And in all of there's those moments of realizing there's so much possible if you are training for it. And if you're setting your mind towards it and you're making a plan to do something big. I think all of this, for me, it was a huge confidence booster that I then brought back into my work life. And in the last 3 years, and I started working for myself, and I have now my own leadership and social impact consultancy and practice. That's when I also started writing a book, and the book is just really a few weeks from being published. And I think by the time people are listening to this podcast, it will be available. And this is a framework, a leadership mindset and framework forged at the edge. So it's really a 6-shift framework where I'm really bringing everything from braving the unknown to owning your identity to working with other people and leveraging this collective power to then the doing it and praising your presence. And then the more really critical point about the regenerating so that you're not burning out in the process. So for me, it's all about being a trailblazer for change, for positive change, and inspiring other people and shifting culture, but setting it up in a sustainable way so that there is no burnout. And this was incredibly challenging process, actually writing a book. I thought endurance challenges are challenging. And then I started writing a book and I realized this is actually just another challenge, more on a mindset level of trying to put it all together and making it where in a way sense, not just for me, but for just so that I'm able to share it with other people. But to me, this is really a little bit, it's the essence of it. There's so much to be learned in nature, in pushing yourself physically outside your comfort zone and reflecting on that and using that for other areas of life. It doesn't have to be in the workspace. It doesn't have to be in leadership. It can be just in day-to-day life, in your personal leadership of your specific community. But just using this learning, that energy, that drive, and the pausing and the regeneration. Because in any endurance preparation, there's always some rest days. There's always some days where you do maybe complete resting or do maybe something like stretching or just have a gear less active and really applying all of those lessons to your day-to-day life so that this energy is just there at the highest level possible. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm really excited that I'm now actually releasing into the world. The book is called B.O.L.D.E.R, B-O.L.D.E.R, like not just being bold, but actually being bolder to really the next level of making a difference.
And who do you think the book is for? Who would benefit from reading it?
Initially, I was really thinking, okay, it's for the change-making community that I've been spending my last kind of 10, 15 years. But the reality, I think it is actually interesting for anyone who wants to make a change in their life or in the world. It needs to be someone who has either a social or environmental interest, or on the other hand, who is also an endurance athlete. Because it's the two, that's kind of this intersection that I'm interested in, is this endurance, impact, leadership. So I think it's for people who want to really do positive change in the world. And that could be either in a nonprofit sense, it could be a startup company, it could be someone who is really fostering and nurturing communities, but also really people who want to be active and bold in a physical sense as well. For those people who are more just like interested in it, I think, so instead of being themselves physical, I think there is also still a lot of in there. But of course, I'm coming from the aspect of actually trying to go out and exhaust myself in physical terms as well as in mental terms. So I have the feeling those people who are also interested in your podcast are actually the perfect audience, because it's just this making a little bit more out of the physical challenges and overcoming physical challenges.
And you do actually give the Tough Girl podcast a little shout out, which I really appreciate. It did inspire you in a way. Would you like to share how the Tough Girl podcast inspired you?
Yeah, and absolutely. And really, I think your podcast is just so great, because it's, as I was saying, like there were phases in my life where I found it just really difficult to find role models, and especially role models as a woman. And as I also hinted already, there were a few times in my life where I had this feeling, I need to do something big. need to really get out of my shell, really out of my comfort zone, just to shake everything up and try something on a much higher level. And so 3 years ago is when I started my journey as being an entrepreneur. But before that, I really was in this phase again. I was looking for something big. And then I was thinking, oh, maybe the Marathon des Sables. It was one of those things I heard about it. And all I knew and all I had seen was actually images of men crossing the finish line. I also associated it to elite runners. I knew this existed, but I wasn't taking it really as a serious idea. And I don't know how this happened, but then I found your podcast, and I found this whole podcast series of you and other women sharing their experiences of how to get ready and how to do the race in the 250 kilometers through the Sahara. And suddenly it just sounded so much more tangible. It sounded like, oh, those are real women with a huge amount of drive, a huge amount of energy, but actually just women who I could connect with, where I had the feeling they're a bit like Birgit. And it was a huge confidence booster that it's maybe the right thing to do. And then, yeah, it didn't take me long. It was literally one of those moments where, like, one moment a few years before, I read a book in the library, and overnight made the decision I cycled the African continent. And 3.5, 4 years ago was when I listened to this podcast and had the feeling, okay, I think it's just a matter of, do I have enough time? Is 7 months enough time to get ready? Or is it something I need to do another day in my life? And then it all aligned, and I decided 7 months is ready. I will be ready. And it was absolutely amazing. And I couldn't have hoped for any better experience. It was such an amazing race, so hard and so difficult and so cruel, but also just an absolute extraordinary experience. And being out there and being in those vast open landscapes and running, climbing up and then later on running down the sand dunes, and the sand is everywhere splashing, and those long times over the salt flats. It was just such a reset button for me. I'm really not surprised that then 2 weeks after the race was when I made the final decision. I'm going full in. I'm starting my own journey, and I registered my business, and my independent journey started. And this is this pattern that I have had many times in my life, where I just needed something quite big to shake me physically. But because it's not just the physical things, there's so much mindset work and reflection and allowing myself to think big, to dream and to make things happen, that then creates that energy. And of course, a little bit of a high after achieving something that big, which then gave me just that little extra spark of saying, yes, I'm just going full out, and I'm going a new route, and I'm trying how it is to actually start my own business rather than working for someone in employment.
Good for you. You are living your life on your terms, which is so, so inspiring. And Birgit, how can people connect with you? How can they follow along with your future challenges and adventures and keep up to date with your company and the work that you're doing? Where should they connect with you?
The easiest is my website, which is my name, birgithermann.com. Then all my social media is called Be Inspired by Nature. But the easiest is just going to my website and then going from there. It's a work in process. It's quite a new project for me, actually, having the website, but I'm filling it with content, and there's linkages to social media to be along. And please reach out. For me, the biggest learning is really having community and having people that are sharing something. So it's either the sport, the little niche area, or it's just that attitude of pushing boundaries, not taking no for an answer, shifting culture, and inspiring change. And it's just so much more powerful having other people in your life with similar ambitions. So please, if anyone feels like we have something in common, please reach out. I would love to connect.
I think your website's looking great, actually, because you've got information about your book, or you've got a blog on there, you've got information about the work you do, but also the expeditions, which is really fantastic. So I will include all of the links in the show notes so that people can reach out and can connect. But Birgit, I'd love for you to share your final words of wisdom, final words of advice for other women who are looking to be bolder, to live bolder. Apart from just do it, what advice would you like to share?
Talk about it. That's actually doing that first step of actually saying it out loud, what you have in mind. Because that's my experience. The moment you talk about it and you talk about it with a passion and with enthusiasm, there are people who support you. There's always someone who has done something or knows someone who can help you opening doors, finding resources, finding information. And then you have a small community of support. So that's for me really the biggest learning. It's just not being quiet about it, not waiting too long. And of course, doing it, but actually talking about it and using that as the first step of the momentum.
Talk about it. Very, very powerful. Birgit, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast and sharing your story. It's been so amazing to connect with you, and congratulations on your book as well. And I'm really excited to see what the next challenge is that you take on.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Hey, tribe. How are you all doing? I really hope you're having a fabulous March. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, I hope the change in weather is making a massive difference. I know it is for me. I am not good over the winter months. I do struggle when I'm in the UK, when it is dark and miserable outside. I honestly do just want to hibernate. But when it comes to March, spring is in the air, daffodils are blooming, the skies are blue. It does make me want to get outside. So I may have mentioned this in a couple of previous episodes, but I'm so excited. I am going to be visiting Sheffield this weekend. So March 20th to March 22nd, the Sheffield Adventure Film Festival is happening, which I am so excited about because last year, to celebrate the 10th year anniversary of the Tough Girl podcast, I worked with Jessica from She Makes Films, and she edited together an amazing film called 10, which is a combination of 10 years of the Tough Girl podcast and me hiking the GR10 across the Pyrenees mountain range. So you haven't watched that film already, it is available on my YouTube channel. But if you are local to Sheffield and Sheffield is easy to get to, then come along and watch it in person. Come and meet me. Come and say hi. I am going to be there supporting and watching the film. There is a showing on the Saturday and Sunday. I'm only available at the Saturday showing, which is going to be at 10:45 at Screen 3. I'll be giving a little introduction, have a little chat before the film goes out. There's 3 other films also being presented at the same time, and this is all about walking. But if you are interested in adventure, travel, extreme sports films from around the world, then do go and check out the Sheffield Adventure Film Festival. So the website is shaff.co.uk. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the festival as well. So the Sheffield Adventure Film Festival has a well-earned reputation for being a friendly festival, welcoming everyone, whether you're an outdoor enthusiast or an armchair adventurer who just loves a good story. As well as watching films, you can share a beer with adventure sports athletes and filmmakers in the bar, check out the exhibitors, take inspiration from our free talks, or get involved in a range of ways. And that's just Shaft. Since Sheffield rebranded itself a few years ago as the Outdoor City, the Festival of the Outdoors has become the UK's biggest month on the outdoor calendar, boasting Shaft, the Climbing Works International Festival, Urban Cycle Cross and Orienteering, the Sheffield Walking Festival, and plenty more. Each summer, festival founder and director Matt Heeson and co-director Frit Tam start watching the hundreds of films that are submitted to Shaft. It is a labour of love. Around 100 make the official selection each year, and we're more than happy to give feedback on any films that don't make the final cut. We're particularly keen to bring new and diverse talent to the screen and to increase the representation in front of and behind the camera. We're always looking for ways to work with and find opportunities for young, up-and-coming directors, producers, and local filmmakers and photographers. Passionate about your sport? Then try our specialist selections. Want a high energy hit? Then book our adrenaline showings. Fancy inspiration and escapism? Go for Spirit of Adventure. There's also our Adventure Bite session, a highly discounted hour-long loop of films which you can dip into at any time of the weekend to get a taster of what it is all about. It's family friendly. Our Young Adventurers showing sell out, and we certify the whole programs, which has made it much more friendly to under 18s. Getting there is easy. We encourage all of our visitors to travel sustainably using public transport or human power. We're very close to the mainline train station with regular services to the Peak District, Manchester, and all over the UK. There are plenty of local buses, trams, and nearby car parks. So I am super excited to be attending the festival. It'll be awesome if you're there and want to come and say hi, come and take a selfie with me, come and have a chat. I would love to connect with you. I'd love to meet you. And I want to hear about your adventures and challenges that you've done or that you've got coming up in the future. Now, everything that we have talked about today will be available in the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com. So please do go and check out the website. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all. Give it 110%. Get after it. Go for it. Believe in yourself because I believe in you. Take care. Lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.